Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lo Savres, and I'm a retired NYPD detective from the bomb squad and a proud military veteran. Less than 24 hours from now, I will be starting my 69th round of chemotherapy. Yeah, you heard that correct. I should not be here with you, but you made me come. You made me come because I will not stand by and watch as my friends with cancer from 9/11, like me, are valued less than anyone else because of when they get sick, they die. I have been lucky enough to have had 68 rounds of chemo. Yeah, you heard me right, 68 rounds. Many others haven't had the opportunity to have 5, and some have had none. Their families would love to have time with them that made mine have time with me. Because I have been lucky enough to have the pain and suffering of 69 rounds of chemo and countless other treatments and surgeries. It is my goal, and it is my legacy, to see that you do the right thing for all 9/11 responders. Please understand that we are not here for anything for ourselves. We became police officers, firefighters, paramedics to help others. We went to Ground Zero, the Pentagon, and Shanksville to help people first, and then help their families bury someone or something. We were there with one mission, and we left after completing that mission. I have been to many places in this world. Excuse me. And done many things. But I can tell you that I did not want to be anywhere else but Ground Zero when I was there. We were part of showing the world that we would never back down from terrorism and that we could all work together. No races, no colors, no politics. Now that the 9/11 illnesses have taken many of us, and we are all worried about our children and spouses and our families if we are not here. The VCF has done a wonderful job and treated my family with greatest respect. But my life isn't worth more than the next responder to get cancer. My family needs are not worth less than any others who have already died. This fund is not a ticket to paradise. It is there to provide for our families when we can't. Nothing more. You all said you would never forget. Well, I'm here to make sure that you don't. You made me come down here the day before my 69th round of chemo. And I'm going to make sure that you never forget to take care of the 9/11 responders. Thank you for your time.
Welcome to the Whistleblower Newsroom. I'm Christina Borgeson. What you just heard was dying New York Police Department veteran Luis Alvarez begging Congress to renew the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund Act. Alvarez appeared with comedian Jon Stewart, who passionately dressed down Congress for not having already renewed the act.
As I sit here today, I can't help but think what an incredible metaphor this room is for the entire process that getting health care and benefits for 9/11 first responders has come to. Behind me, a filled room of 9/11 first responders, and in front of me, a nearly empty Congress. Sick and dying, they brought themselves down here to speak to no one. It's shameful. It's an embarrassment to the country, and it is a stain on this institution. And you should be ashamed of yourselves for those that aren't here, but you won't be. Because accountability doesn't appear to be something that occurs in this chamber.
The act is now funded up to the year 2092. But serious questions remain about what exactly caused the illnesses that have been killing tens of thousands of first responders so painfully and often slowly. My guest today is going to review evidence found in the tissues of 9/11 emergency responders that was documented by Mount Sinai Hospital researchers and physicians. Kevin Ryan, former site manager for the Environmental Testing Division of Underwriters Laboratories, is here today to talk about a 2009 case report by Mount Sinai titled Lung Disease in World Trade Center Responders Exposed to Dust and Smoke, Carbon Nanotubes Found in the Lungs of World Trade Center Patients and Dust Samples. This report led to Ryan's own 2011 article titled Energetic Materials as a Potential Cause of the 9/11 First Responder Illnesses. Mr. Ryan will share his thoughts about the Mount Sinai report's results and talk about what led to the conclusions he drew in his article. While working for Underwriters Laboratories, Mr. Ryan began to publicly question the laboratory's testing of the structural materials used to construct the World Trade Center buildings and the laboratory's involvement in the World Trade Center investigation being conducted by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. He was fired for this. Since 2006, he has been the editor of the Journal of 9/11 Studies and has authored books and peer-reviewed scientific articles on forensic evidence linked to 9/11. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Christina.
I want to start talking about the April 2010 Mount Sinai case report on what they found in the tissues of otherwise 7 previously healthy people who were at the World Trade Center site on 9/11, because I'm assuming that that is part of what led to your article that you wrote.
Yeah, the article was written, the lead author was Maoshin Wu. She's a Department of Pathology professor at the New York University at Stony Brook. And so this was a tissue study. So the researchers got samples from 9/11 first responders and studied the content of those lung tissue samples. And they found a couple of unusual things, 2 things specifically that stood out to me. And that included, they found plate-like configurations of aluminum and silicon. So they call them aluminum silicate platey configurations. And they found those to be very unusual in the lungs. And the second thing they found were what are called carbon nanotubes. So these are very tiny nanoscale materials made entirely of carbon that require a specific set of circumstances to produce. So these are the 2 findings that stood out to me and that relate to the studies that colleagues and I have done on World Trade Center dust samples and the environmental data at the World Trade Center.
They did this pathologic summary, and I was looking at it, and what was so interesting, it's not just the aluminum silicate, but also magnesium silicate, right? I mean, aren't aluminum and magnesium both used for ordnance?
Yeah, magnesium is also something that is used to ignite, for example, the thermite materials. And so, the silicon, of course, comes into the picture when we're talking about nanothermites. So silicon is used to prepare intimately mixed materials, if that's the cause of it, which there could be other reasons. There's really two reasons why we might find, for example, these materials. And one is that, they were created somehow in the fires. They were created in these high temperature fires, and they did.
But what would that somehow be?
The only thing that really makes any sense is the thermite reaction. So, in particularly with regard to the carbon nanotubes, the aluminum plate-like aluminum silicates or magnesium silicates. If you recall, colleagues and I produced a paper called "Active Thermitic Material Discovered at the World Trade Center." It was a quite well-known paper published in an open journal of chemical physics. And this was back in 2009. And, we found these red-gray chips throughout the World Trade Center dust. So the more well-known authors, other than myself, include Niels Harrit, a professor at the University of Copenhagen, and Stephen Jones, a professor at the Brigham Young University. One thing that paper brought out was that these red-gray chips contain exactly the same sort of thing, these plate-like aluminum and silicon configurations. And they're even pictured by electron microscopy in the paper itself. They're not pictured in the Mount Sinai study. So these were lung tissue samples, so perhaps they couldn't get the same sort of visual image that we were able to get from the red.
Why would that be?
It's likely because it's wet tissue sample. And so, they can see them through the electron microscopy, but they maybe couldn't get the same picture. At least they didn't include them in the paper that I reviewed. So interestingly, I did reach out to Dr. Wu, and she responded in very supportive fashion. She stated that she really felt like these carbon nanotubes in particular were going to stay with the patients, and they were going to continue to cause disease, and that she felt like there's a lot more study needed into where this material came from. So, but when we talk about whether it be carbon nanotubes or aluminum silicate type, magnesium silicate type materials, those are the kinds of things that cause disease of the kinds that we're seeing in the 9/11 first responders. So, for example, the aluminum silicates will cause kind of immune system diseases like interstitial lung diseases. And
what does that mean?
Well, the lung tissue gets filled with this material, and it causes a number of things that generate disease. So, I'm not a doctor. Dr. Wu, of course, is, but I'm a chemist. So I can't go into all the details of the of the physiological response. But I do know that the diseases that have been named through the World Trade Center Health Program, they do kind of the pulmonary fibrosis and things like that. Those are caused by aluminum silicates. So aluminum dust or powder is something that's part of a thermite mixture. And then as it is combined in a nanothermite material, is combined with silicon. And so that's where we find these plate-like structures in these red-gray chips. And it's interesting that they used at Stony Brook the same term, kind of platy configurations, the unusual platy configurations in our paper, which, by the way, we hadn't reviewed the Dr. Wu paper previous to publishing our 2009 paper, but we used the same terminology, the plate-like configuration of these aluminum silicon materials. So it seems to really call for a potential or for additional study. And I've definitely tried to do that myself. I can go into that, but
Let's
yeah,
talk about the carbon nanotubes.
yeah.
What caused them?
Carbon nanotubes can only be produced under specific conditions. So, the in a fire, they require very high heat. So, in fact, for a flame-produced carbon nanotube, you require temperatures of 1100 degrees Celsius. So, that's over 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, and those just weren't present they're not present in an office fire. So that's another indication that the thermite reaction, which is very exothermic and produces temperatures, of 3000 degrees Fahrenheit, is can provide that kind of temperature. The other thing it requires is a metal catalyst, and specific metal catalysts are usual for the single wall carbon nanotubes: iron and nickel and cobalt. So iron and nickel and cobalt are the three that are most often used to produce carbon nanotubes. And iron oxide, of course, is the other major component of thermite. So aluminum powder and iron oxide react to form aluminum oxide, which causes some of these same diseases. Aluminum oxide also causes these lung diseases, and molten iron. So, and then the third thing is the source of carbon. So for carbon nanotubes, it has to be, a source of pure carbon, and or organic materials that basically can be broken down very readily into organic carbon. Very high temperature in the metal catalyst. The three of those have to come together to form carbon nanotubes. And it's an unusual finding in the lung tissue of materials or of first responders, because it hasn't been found, or at least recorded, in the lung tissue of people who were exposed to other fires. So,
Where did the carbon come from?
the carbon actually in nanothermite is part of the organic phase. So it's actually mixed together. The aluminum is a very fine nanoscale powder, and the iron oxide is also very fine. And then they're mixed together. I've made nanothermite myself, and they're mixed together with organic materials in order to form this kind of gel material that allows the intimate mixture, and the pores that are created from the carbon and silicon organic material allows for the aluminum and iron oxide to be distributed in such a way that they react the most efficiently. And so, the carbon is there, the metal catalyst, the iron is there, the very high temperature is there, all in the nanothermite condition, and we've proven that, of course. So, if you've seen my article at my blog about Niels Harrit's finding, he knew I was making these nanothermite materials at home in my garage, and
that's kind of scary, knowing that stuff can be done in a garage.
It can. Yeah. For a long time, people thought, well, no, this can't be done, except under very unusual circumstances. But, I'm a trained chemist, so I'm able to get the materials and understand the formulation and perform it. I didn't make it on large quantities of it, just enough to kind of study it and to ignite it. So I've got videos available where you can see the preparation and ignition of this nanothermite material. And Dr. Harrit asked me to send some of the residues to him in Denmark, which I did. And then he presented at the Toronto hearings on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. He presented the fact that he and colleagues at the University of Copenhagen did analytical work and found that carbon nanotubes were present in the residues of the nanothermite ignition.
Last year, there were published a paper in Experimental Health Perspectives by a group of doctors from the Mount Sinai Medical School in Manhattan. They looked into the lung tissue of World Trade Center responders, and they found some thread-like tubular structures in 4 out of 7 patients which were ill, in numbers ranging from 11,000 to 230,000 per gram wet tissue. This is the same material which they found also in the World Trade Center dust. Kevin Ryan just showed you in his backyard how he ignited the nanothermite he had produced himself. And he sent it to me. You remember he came in, he took the beaker and you saw down into it. Yes. He left it cooling a little bit. He put it into a letter and sent it to me. And what I did then is to take a little sample out of this, pouring a few milliliters of alcohol, ethanol, onto it, making a slush in a mortar, actually, letting the particles, all the metal particles, all the heavy particles precipitate. And then you take a little drop of the supernatant liquid, you put them onto a copper grid, which the panelists can also see here, they're very, very small. And you let the ethanol evaporate. You put them into a transmission electron microscope, and this is what you see. You see exactly the same structures here, and there's no other explanation for this.
We know now that nanothermite does make carbon nanotubes. We verified that by sending samples to an independent laboratory, a laboratory that's does this for a living. They do analysis of various samples, and they found the same thing. So I sent additional residues to this independent laboratory and had it confirmed that carbon nanotubes and single wall carbon nanotubes, the same kinds that were found in the lungs of the 9/11 first responders, were found both in Denmark and by this independent lab through these residues.
You know what keeps going through my head as you're saying all this? How come you guys have not put together some kind of a report with all those videos of your experiments and sent them to this doctor?
Dr. Wu. I did
Dr.
actually.
Wu, and also to the people at Mount Sinai who are specifically treating the New York firefighters.
I did send the blog article to Dr. Wu. She was very supportive in her response. She felt like we were doing great work. The issue that we really need to address is not that Dr. Wu is doing continual lung tissue testing of the work of the first responders, because that was one study that she was directing. But really, what we needed and what we tried to get through some folks in New York City. So, for example, I coordinated with Bill Gleason, who was the president of the World Trade Center Rescuers Foundation, and Ted Walter, who ran an organization called New York City CAN at the time. And the New York City CAN was trying to get a new investigation into 9/11, and Bill Gleason was trying to get answers about why his friends and all his, firefighting comrades were dying.
Yes.
Just huge numbers of people dying of these unusual illnesses. And so, Bill and I communicated for a number of years, and I put together a proposal for him to present to the New York City Council, which he did for a new study. So the idea here is not just to review data that's already existing and try to piece things together like we've been doing, but do a specific study comparing lung tissues from 9/11 lung tissue samples from 9/11 first responders to the World Trade Center dust materials that we're seeing. And so I put this proposal
But
together.
isn't that what the Mount Sinai people did? Because they studied they did study the World Trade Center dust, and they took slides of the tissues.
We've published several research papers about the World Trade Center dust, establishing extremely high temperatures at the World Trade Center, and then establishing the presence of these red-gray chips, these thermitic chips. And so anyway, getting back to this proposal, so Bill Gleason did bring this proposal and our research to the New York City Council. And they were very interested in the opportunity to actually help the 9/11 first responders, but they balked at the idea of the comparison to any explosive materials. So they wouldn't go there because it had connotations of that led to the idea of explosive demolition hypothesis.
You know, the question is, do you want to know what's in their lungs and why?
Exactly.
Or do you not? If you don't want to go there, then what are you doing? You're not helping. You know, I think about this. I think about Jon Stewart going to Congress and spanking Congress for not properly supporting these first responders. But does he realize really what he's looking at? Would he be willing to acknowledge it if he did know? This is the wall that everybody keeps running into, right?
Yeah, this is the cognitive dissonance that we all see all the time when we try to do research on 9/11. It's the same thing when people say, I just can't go there just to learn about 9/11 at all, learn about what happened and how the buildings fell and, you know, how the planes were not intercepted and all the different aspects of 9/11. They just can't go there. Well, this is the point where maybe people can go there, because I have had 9/11 first responders write to me and say, because they've learned about my research and say, I will participate. I will give you lung tissue sample. They will do it. But, you know, we've got to get the study sponsored by someone in, particularly if possible in New York City, so that there's some ownership, authoritative ownership of the study. That's what
Why
we really
wouldn't
do.
Mount Sinai do it?
Well, perhaps they will. And
I mean,
perhaps
that's their focus, is the
Yeah.
firefighters. There's six New York area medical facilities that treat the first responders, the emergency responders, and people who were in the area at the time who have also been affected. We're talking about altogether between the emergency responders, who are up to like 80,000 people now, by the way. That's a 2020, that's last year's report
Yeah.
from Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
And I think 30,000 other people who are just in the area. That's
Exactly.
a lot of people.
That's very accurate. That's what I found as well. Over 120, about 120,000 people were impacted, and there's 65,000 people who are registered with the World Trade Center Health Program. So, you know, that means that they have some certifiable sickness, some sickness that has been certified to be associated with the World Trade Center. And, you know, I'll go into a little bit more of that, but
Okay.
the fact is that as of last year, on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, more people had died of World Trade Center sicknesses than died on 9/11 a year ago.
Wow.
More had died a year ago than had died on 9/11. And they're going to continue to die, right? So of the 65,000 certified members at the World Trade Center Health Program, over 20,000 have cancers, right? And some of them have multiple cancers.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of people who have multiple cancers from their exposure to the World Trade Center dust and the environment there. Now, there's a whole nother crime about the fact that Christy Todd Whitman and Rudy Giuliani told everybody the air was safe to breathe.
Getting the truth and protecting people are part of the EPA's mandate. But if the air at Ground Zero was safe, why were so many people getting sick? Even some of EPA's own staff doubted the agency's assurances about safety. Among them, senior policy analyst Hugh Kaufman.
Mrs. Whitman went on national TV, smiled at the camera, and told everybody everything is safe, and it wasn't.
As I say, you know, asbestos was in there, is in those buildings, lead is in those buildings. There are the VOCs. However, the concentrations are such that they don't pose a health hazard. We're going to make sure everybody's safe.
They basically did that to try to speed up the removal of everything and to get the downtown area kind of back to business, I guess. But you know, these cancers are very rare, some of them, and they're unusual. So
what kinds of cancers are we talking about?
Well, we've got the normal ones like leukemia. We've got unusual things like multiple myeloma. We've got men with breast cancer. You know, we've got a number of men who's got male breast cancer, which is very unusual, right? We've got some of these unusual lung related cancers as well. And what we found is, we did a research paper. I did one with Steve Jones, an attorney named James Gurley. It's called Environmental Anomalies at the World Trade Center, Evidence for Energetic Materials. It was published in a mainstream scientific journal called The Environmentalist, a Springer journal. And it showed that there were really unusual kind of energetic events happening at the World Trade Center over a period of really 5 months after 9/11. And you may know that, the fires couldn't be put out at Ground Zero. They're very, really unusual things where they were pouring millions of gallons of water into the pile. They were using specific fire suppression materials to try to suppress the fires. There was heavy rainfall, all the dust. They couldn't put out the fires. That's another indication that we were dealing with some sort of incendiary material, something that had its own oxygen like thermite does. We found that the EPA, the data released by EPA and the University of California Davis showed that there were some really sharp, violent spikes in emissions of specific chemicals on really specific dates. And that kind of indicated to me that there were some violent incendiary events going on. But
like,
the levels,
what were the elements and what were the intervals?
some of the compounds were like benzene and styrene. Benzene causes leukemia, and benzene doesn't typically show up in a structure fire at these levels. They're huge, hundreds of thousands of ppm on given days, months after the event.
That's parts per million, right?
Yeah. And so there was another unusual chemical found that had never been found in a structure fire before. The EPA wrote very clearly that it had never been found, that dwarfed, it was present at levels that dwarfed all others, and they'd never observed it in any sampling before. It's a chemical called 1,3-diphenylpropane, so 1,3-DPP. And this is something that we wrote about in this paper as well. So there's another mystery. There's, lots of.
Well, wait a second. What's benzene normally used for?
Well, benzene is not used for things. It's a combustion product of plastic, burning of plastics, the same as styrene. And the difference here at Ground Zero is that these violent incendiary events were burning the plastics to vapor. I mean, they were burning them to gaseous state immediately, right? So there's huge amounts of these volatile organic chemicals being created, being spiked up on these dates every other week for 5 months. And the fires just couldn't be put out. They just continued to occur. So
now,
there's...
Well, wait a second. What about the other exotic...
So these metals and silicon, again, we're getting back to the same sort of thing. Aluminum and silicon and iron. These are things that are bursting out of the pile at these intervals. Particulate matter. So the UC Davis folks, they were studying what are called aerosols. So they're kind of like droplets of material, and they're being carried around. And months after the events of 9/11, they're saying we're still seeing these large particulate matter spikes, and it makes no sense. The only reason, and they say this in their research, the only way that could happen is there's some high temperature events going on in the pile. And so, all these unusual things.
Now, if you think about it, could that these high temperature events, could they be because there was still thermitic material in the wreckage that was still being ignited?
Yeah, that's what we think. Yeah. And so,
Wow.
that's the hypothesis. And we spell out the hypothesis in this paper at the Environmentalist. We say, look, these nano level materials are being made of thermite, and they can be applied in certain ways, and they're composed of the same materials you're seeing in these spikes, other than, of course, the volatile organic chemicals that are combustion byproducts. Particulate matter, they're combustion byproducts, but some of them appear to be actual components of whatever it is that's burning. So when we're talking about aluminum and iron and silicon and sulfur, we're talking about thermite, potentially, right? Or something that causes these very high temperatures and incendiary events that are violent. So there's all these different rare things happening in the EPA data, in the UC Davis data, and at Stony Brook with the CNTs. And it all really kind of points to the possibility that thermitic materials, as we've found in the World Trade Center dust, were present in the pile at ground zero and were being ignited periodically as the pile was being cleaned up somehow, as the
Now, did this include Building 7 too when it came down? Was there?
Yeah. Well, sure. Yeah. Building 7 was just across the street. So, the EPA data also covered the World Trade Center 7 area. So, yeah, and they don't necessarily specifically, I don't have the specifics as to the specific site for each incendiary event. Like this one on October 11th was this location under World Trade Center 1, and this was under World Trade Center 7. So it's just the World Trade Center complex was seeing these very high levels of these combustion byproducts and also components of thermitic materials. And so, as I said, we've really tried to get some of this communicated to the public. I published an article in Foreign Policy Journal, which I think is the one that you asked me about a week or two ago. And, what I tried to do with that Foreign Policy Journal article, because it was getting a lot of interest. Bill Gleason, again, of the World Trade Center Rescuers Foundation, said that the doctors he was talking to were very interested in this research. They were also very continually interested in carbon nanotubes and talking more and more about it. But again, it kind of collapsed when we tried to get the New York City Council to help fund a $500,000 study, a research study, because these research scientists that will really do it it won't be me that will do this research. It will be, independent, like Dr. Wu and others who would do the actual
God,
research.
you only need $500,000, like a little
$500,000 is what I
measly
estimate.
$500,000 for a study.
Yeah. And so, we tried to get the Foreign Policy Journal published the article published at the Lancet, because you may remember on the 10th anniversary, the Lancet, which is a prestigious medical journal, called for articles specific to 9/11 and the events of 9/11. So I submitted that. I also tried to get a co-author who was more of a medical a doctor, PhD level scientist to co-author with me. And they were, of course, again, very interested. But the fact is, they felt like they weren't the specific people that should be doing it, and that the people who could specifically do it would be silent. They wouldn't help. So, and I've gotten through this, getting all these peer-reviewed articles published, Christina. I can tell you, that's the same story I hear. So if I have an article I want to get published in a peer-reviewed journal and submit it, and I get a response, it's typically, we can't go there, or there's some blame excuse about how it's not related to their journal, which is often just ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just that cognitive dissonance is causing this issue. So I think you might be right. It's possible that we can get Dr. Wu, who seems very supportive in her response, to participate in the study, but then we would need others, and we would need some money.
Don't you think that some kind of some experts from the military realm on explosives, and there are, I think, physicians, people who are physicians as well as chemists or whatever. I mean, they know what explosives there are, and they probably know what effects the explosives have. Has anybody in the military realm ever been approached?
I haven't specifically approached people because they're in the military. And I certainly wouldn't reject them because they're in the military. But no, I haven't looked into that. So if you have any ideas, please
I
let me
mean,
know.
I wonder too if there are any other correlative events in which similar types of explosives were used, creating similar victims. If any thought has been given to that in terms of, well, has there been some kind of explosive event that could have
Right, right.
matched this?
Yeah, I don't know. And, it makes me recall the fact that really some of the initial people who came to investigate the events at the World Trade Center were officers in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So,
Oh,
um, yeah,
interesting.
so Gene Corley, who was famous for having, investigated both the Oklahoma City bombing and also the World Trade Center event,
Oh,
and some of his comrades. So I'm sure there are others in the military who would be able to present more of an objective viewpoint than some of those folks. But really, I think the key to this, just like with Bill Gleason, if you get Bill Gleason, somebody like leading the first responders organizations, going and asking for help, saying, we're dying personally. We will provide the samples personally. We just need the money and the scientists to do the work. So we could get back into that and ask for help in that way, but we have to be able to address the right people. So it's at this point we know
well,
it's not the New York Times.
it's a real trick because I'll tell you, it was very interesting. Eric Lawyer, who is a Seattle firefighter, who started the firefighters group, the 9/11 firefighters group. It took him 10 years to wrap his mind around the possibility that the official narrative was not true. And I totally understand that for the people who went and put their lives on the line. If they were to wake up one day and find out that they were being sent into a pre-planned explosive event, that that would be quite shocking given all the other things that have unfolded, including the wars and stuff and their illnesses and so on,
Right.
from this event. And he says some of them are finally coming around because they're all getting desperate because they're dying like flies.
Yeah.
So here, when you're at your weakest point, you're dying or you're sick, you have to wrap your mind around what it is that's making you sick. And what the forensic evidence is showing is not what your government said happened.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And so that's where we're hoping the cognitive dissonance will break with the people who are dying. And a lot more people are going to die, a lot more. I mean, we're expecting another 20,000 cancers to be diagnosed related to the World Trade Center. Just huge numbers of people, children, lots of children who were exposed to the environment there as well. And so you'd think that at some point people will say, hey, we've had enough of, kind of the hand waving answers and the money's running out, right? The James Zadroga bill, they don't have enough money.
Yeah, that's what Jon Stewart was up there at Congress. He was fighting for these people. But again, it's like I say to Jon Stewart, John, man, if you really want to fight for something, fight for what has caused this so that they can address it. And if you do that, then you're shaking up everything on a global scale, literally. You know, and so you've got these people who, a lot of people who still don't want to go there, who, I mean, even Wu, I'm sure she's going to think twice before she takes it. She's all excited now because her researcher brain is, wow, this will be great, this will be huge. But then if she stops to think about the implications of what she might find, she might be, she might back off because it could mean her career, it could mean her family. Who knows what it could mean? Because there's been pushback on people, and it's not a pretty sight.
Believe me, I know. I was fired for speaking out about it. So, I've been on your show before, and we talked about, I think, the suspects angle. But most of my work has been scientific research, and so, I really think if we focus on the science and we try to help the people who are dying and pull together with them, it's possible that we can get another study funded.
It's 21 years later, and there's still no accountability. That is, if you're looking at the forensic evidence,
Yeah.
because the forensic evidence is saying one thing, and it's not. I chose the first responders for this show and you for this show because I think it's important for people to hear the science connected to these people who are dying en masse, who are suffering en masse, while everybody wants to hide under a rock. And while you're hiding under that rock, by the way, all the consequences from this World Trade Center disaster, all the consequences and decisions made based on the false narrative continue to this day, and the consequences are deadly. So you keep hiding under that rock until next thing you know, there is no rock and there is no you either. And I don't know what people are waiting for. I do not know what people are waiting for. And I really feel for these people. I really do. And, John is trying to get money to help them with their illness. And I respect that. I respect that. But, Congress is just trying to sort of, first of all, they've spending money like drunken sailors on all kinds of things. And so this thing, oh, well, this is a million years ago. Let's just try and back off of the funding and this and that. And, they're all saying, not only are we still here, but our numbers are growing.
Yeah. Yeah, the numbers are growing and more people are going to die, and we'll probably more than double the death count in the next 20 years, because as time goes on, these cancers, cancer is the kind of thing that develops more over time, typically is caused by multiple genetic mutations in the cells. So, they can occur and then the effects then aren't seen for a number of years. So I think we're going to see, unfortunately, more and more of this. And the only real way to know what to do is to find out what happened. That's the only way.
I just want to go back to this pathologic summary, because the two things that really struck me was the aluminum silicate and the magnesium silicate. Those are both ignition sources. They are way above anything else. 165,600 per gram. Everything else is like 110, 36,000. But consistently 165,600, 184,000, 110, 400,000.
Yeah. And you know what? We have to, going forward and every day, we have to realize that we don't know exactly what happened on 9/11. We know some things that aren't part of the official narrative. We know for a fact that nanothermite materials were present at the World Trade Center. We know that. We found them. We don't know what else was there. We don't know exactly how the buildings came down, exactly what was used. We know that those things were involved, thermitic materials were involved, but we don't know exactly what happened. And that, these kinds of studies can additionally inform that story, so that, it sounds crazy, but the ability to know the history is so important. To be able to understand the history of where we came from is so important to how we move forward and how we address things that are happening today. And that's the problem people have. They can't accept the possibility of some alternative hypotheses related to 9/11, because those things have never happened before, right? The government would never be involved in any kind of cover up. The government that would never happen.
I don't know. I guess I'm so old and have done so many investigations, in-depth investigations where that's been the case. I mean, I spent 17 years of my life looking into TWA, same thing. Plane explodes off off the
Yeah.
coast of Long Island. Oh no, no explosives involved in that. And yet, they're testing fuselage and it's coming up positive for explosives, so they just stop testing. And they determine that most of them are false positives, and then they come up with a ridiculously easily debunked story about the rest of them. A couple left. So I've seen this movie before.
You've seen some of the same players like Robert Mueller, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Cleanup Man. Yes. And I look at these people who are suffering, and there's just this feeling of complete powerlessness, because who is going to do that study that needs
Yeah.
to be done? And you know what, Kevin, that's one study.
Yeah.
Who's going to take everything to court, and what judge is going to have the guts to say, well, I mean, the science has spoken?
Yeah, there's that final justice aspect to it, but I think even before that, there's still a lot of people in our country and in the world who don't yet understand the possibilities, that even the possibility that they're being lied to about 9/11 would not cross their minds. It couldn't cross their minds because it hasn't happened before, anything like that. Well, the truth is, other things like, maybe not exactly like that, but many other things have happened that are similar, right? The assassination of the president, for example, might
Oh,
be.
that was the kickoff, and
Yeah.
that's when the CIA came up with its, you're a conspiracy theorist if you question the official narrative, and it's that whole conspiracy theorist thing has been off and running ever since. But for 9/11, the thing about 9/11 is there's so many areas of forensic evidence
Yeah.
that point to something else. This nanothermite and even the Mount Sinai study, your reports, Niels Harrod. Then you've got the architects and engineers who, have looked at the forensic evidence on the structural possibility of, say, building 7 going down in free fall, with
Yeah.
with no explosives, just by office fires. I mean, that has been looked at. So there are well established bodies of forensic evidence just sitting there,
Yeah.
and the firefighters have just done well, a couple of years ago they updated this documentary called Calling Out Bravo 7, I think.
Yeah.
An amazing documentary because they bring their forensic expertise to the table, and it's amazing what they have to say. I watched this documentary a couple days ago, and I was blown away because
Yeah.
they were explaining how there's no way the official narrative holds up from their perspectives, and some of them from what they went in there and saw, and from what was happening even before anything was hit. So there are solid bodies of forensic evidence, and you're working the explosives angle, you know. So what else have you been trying to do on this, if anything? I mean, you're already
Yeah.
doing a lot, but
Yeah, I'm thinking that perhaps, get back to the idea of trying to get the study funded, the epidemiological study in which the lung tissue samples are examined side by side with World Trade Center dust samples, and side by side study. And, as I said, I put together a proposal, and just because the New York City Council won't fund it or won't support it, that doesn't mean it can't happen. So I think that I'll publish that on my blog, if not elsewhere, maybe at the Journal of 9/11 Studies, where I'm the editor, and try to get some interest from other sponsors.
I just want to read this to you, and maybe you should call Mount Sinai, because it says here, in this report, we describe clinical, pathologic, and mineralogic findings in 7 previously healthy responders who were exposed to World Trade Center dust on either 11 September or 12 September, who developed severe respiratory impairment or unexplained radiological findings, World Trade Center dust samples were also examined.
Okay.
So, I don't think they mention what they found in the World Trade Center dust, but
Right.
I think that is an important question to ask them.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps they're the right place to pursue, particularly, as I said, very good response from Dr. Wu. Perhaps that her department or
Is she
her area.
Maxine? Is her name Maxine Wu?
Xin Wu. Yeah.
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 Yeah, she was, this is the report, and
Yep.
her name is the first one on it.
Yeah. She's the lead author. Yeah.
So give Dr. Wu a call and say, hey, what'd you find? What'd you find in the dust? And how
Yeah.
did it compare to what you found,
Yeah, I should. And really, I haven't actually gone to the extent of sharing with her our active thermitic material paper, which I think she might find interesting, because that's kind of the point. The point is, we found these materials in the World Trade Center dust. We found she knows we found carbon nanotubes in ignition residues of those materials, but she doesn't know that we found those materials in the World Trade Center dust. And so just carrying on that conversation, perhaps seeing where it goes, would be a good next step.
Yeah, because I have a feeling that they're looking at these elements and they're not understanding, because they're researchers and physicians, they're not really understanding what they're looking at,
Yeah, right.
given all the other evidence and all the other events that occurred, like the spiking and the the pulverization of the concrete and all that stuff.
Right.
So maybe you should go visit Dr. Wu and have
Make a trip maybe I'll make a trip to Stony Brook. I don't want to look threatening in any way, but yeah.
Oh, I don't think that would be the case.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you, I'm sure many people join me in telling you that we're really grateful for the work you're doing. I think, as an investigative reporter, to me, forensic evidence is the bottom line. It's the bottom line. The science, if you're doing your science with integrity, which you are, the science does not lie. So, a little meeting with Ms. Dr. Wu might be in the cards for you. Keep me posted.
Will do. Yeah.
We'll follow your progress closely. Thanks for
All right.
coming on.
Thank you.